Welcome into the Commander's Report. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Thank you guys for joining me here on a Monday. I'm snowed in here. I've got a work from home day today, guys, but tomorrow I'll be back in studio to continue to get you guys coverage of the Washington Commanders. So really do appreciate you guys joining me here today. But we got some coaching stuff in terms of the defensive coordinator search. We've also got some stuff on Anthony Lynn getting another head coaching interview. We're also got some stuff on some uniform news as well for the Washington Commanders. So make sure you guys stick around for that. But make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Whether I'm snowed in here, whether I'm sick, whether it's my day off, I'm making sure I'm getting you guys at least one free Commanders video every single day. And every time there's breaking news, when the Commanders hire their next defensive coordinator, we're going to get you guys a video as fast as we possibly can. When they make big moves this offseason, depending on how big, we'll go live, or we will at the very least get you a breaking news video here on this channel for free. So if you guys want extensive coverage of every single move the Washington Commanders make here in 2026, make sure you guys click that subscribe button. All right, so let's get to the latest when it comes to the defensive coordinator search. And this is pretty much since Friday, since last time I talked with you guys in terms of our news and rumors segments. But Jonathan Gannon, who interviewed for the DC position here in Washington, has been hired as the defensive coordinator of the Green Bay Packers. So Jonathan Gannon is officially out of the running, just like Brian Flores is out of the running. Two guys that this team has interviewed for the defensive coordinator position. Two guys that I would have loved to bring on as the DC here in Washington. Fortunately, don't land either one of those guys. But they did bring in two more people to interview over the weekend. Teryl Austin, the former defensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then Daronte Jones, the pass game coordinator under Brian Flores with the Minnesota Vikings. So I'll start with Teryl Austin, who was the defensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers for the last several seasons since 2022. Before that, he was the DC of, I believe, the Detroit Lions. I think he had a stint in Cincinnati as well. But he's somebody that, if you ask a Steelers fan about Teryl Austin, they are not going to have many nice things to say about him. Now, he does, run a lot of post-snap rotation stuff. He runs the Mike Tomlin style of defense where it is, a lot of 3-4 base, and you got 5 down linemen, and they tried running a lot of man coverage this year. The Steelers honestly weren't very good in man coverage this year, outside of Joey Porter Jr. In my opinion, though, that team was more of a match team or a pure zone team, and he likes to run a lot of cover 3. He likes to run a lot of cover 1, and that does kind of fit with Dan Quinn, who's also a single high guy, which is why I think, it makes sense that he's interviewing Austin here, because the Steelers love to run single high safety defense. The Commanders with Dan Quinn love to run single high safety defense. Most of the league is in the, two high split safety revolution that's going on right now. And I think that's the, modern meta. That's what, the McDonald's of the world are running. That's what the New England Patriots are running. That's what, most of the top coordinators in the league are running is, especially on later downs. This too high safety stuff, but the Commanders and Steelers are kind of these two teams that are still left running, pretty heavy cover 3 and cover 1 style offenses, or defenses, I should say. Now, to be fair, really great defenses like Denver and in Houston run a lot of single high safety as well. And Dan Quinn has certainly had a lot of success running single high safety defenses. The Steelers have had success running single high quite a bit over the years. So, I think hiring Teryl Austin would be pretty uninspired for the Washington Commanders if they bring him in. He's not particularly great situationally, is something that I would say about him. And he just feels like another guy that would, not be bringing in, a ton of his own ideas and stuff like that. Be more of Dan Quinn running the show, and maybe even with Teryl Austin as DC, Dan Quinn continues to call the plays. That's very possible, and I'd be okay with that if Austin's not calling the plays. I think he knows what the job entails, and he can install a defense, and he can do that sort of stuff. And it's not like his defenses in Pittsburgh were absolutely atrocious. They were, solid units. I would say they underperformed with the talent that they had there. I mean, they spent a ton of money on defense there in Pittsburgh, and they were like, barely scraping the top 10 on a lot of those key metrics a lot of the years that he was there. It's like the expectations there in Pittsburgh was this is going to be the best defense in football every year because of how much they were spending and how much talent they had, and it just seemed like they underperformed expectations every year. If you hire Teryl Austin to run this defense here in Washington with the lack of talent we have here, Lord knows how bad it could get here in Washington. He's not been a very good defensive coordinator anywhere he's been, really. But Daronte Jones is somebody that I am extremely interested in. He's probably my favorite for the job at this point. And the fact that a lot of these teams are hiring other people. You know, the Cowboys hired Christian Parker, the Packers hired Jonathan Gannon. You know, there's a lot of these DC jobs that are starting to close up, which not only improves the chances of potentially Raheem Morris being the defensive coordinator here in Washington, but also Daronte Jones, who, you know, Brian Flores himself credits with running the pre-snap disguises and the post-snap rotations that Vikings defense has been known for many seasons now. Like Flores straight up said in a press conference this year, like, oh, I let Daronte Jones handle that. And that's one of like the main things that people love about the Minnesota Vikings defense. And, you know, it'd be interesting to see if Daronte would want to bring in Flores' style of defense. And I'm guessing he would. I think that's why a lot of these teams are interviewing him. And obviously the Commanders have, you know, some sort of interest in having a Flores style defense here in Washington because they brought in Flores for an interview for their defensive coordinator position, an in-person one in Ashburn. So it seems like Daronte actually has a pretty decent chance of getting the job. There's a number of other people that they have interviewed, obviously, for this position, from Patrick Graham to Joe Cullen to, you know, a bunch of other guys that they've interviewed for this position. But Daronte Jones, out of really everybody else, Carl Scott from Seattle is another one, but Daronte Jones, you know, I think might be my favorite of the crop right now, if I'm the Washington Commanders. And frankly, I'm not waiting. Like, if I can get Daronte Jones right now, I would hire him because I love that Flores style defense with all the hot quarter stuff that they do. You know, how disciplined that defense is. And, you know, when you think about the defensive personnel there in Minnesota, you know, there's not a whole lot of people that were like considered superstar or star level players before going there and now are considered like big time players, like Andrew Van Ginkel and Jonathan Grenard and Blake Cashman, and they revived Harrison Smith's career for a couple more years. You know, they've definitely improved the careers of a lot of people in this league. Josh Metellus is another big one. Like, there's a lot of players that are like really, really impactful players for that defense that in, you know, a normal NFL defense would just be another dude. And I think because of the scheme, you know, the scheme elevates people. And if Daronte Jones is the real deal, I think, you know, bringing that Flores style defense here to Washington would be an awesome compliment to Jaden Daniels and the offense moving forward. So if I'm Dan Quinn, I know he probably wants to hold out for like Raheem Morris, and I would understand that. And I think Raheem would be a good defensive coordinator here. But, you know, there's something that's really exciting about a guy like Daronte Jones in the defense that they run there in Minnesota coming over here to Washington. And I think that's a style of defense that elevates people. And I think that is, if you want, you know, to maximize your success level on the defensive side of the ball here in Washington, I think the number one way you do that is you get a scheme that can elevate your players. Because, you know, frankly, this is not going to be the most talented defense in the league next year. No matter, you know, how much money they spend in free agency, no matter how many draft picks they use on defensive players, this will be a defense that is pretty talent deficient, at least for another year or maybe even 2 years. And having a guy like Daronte Jones, where, you know, they've elevated Josh Metellus, they've elevated Blake Cashman, they've elevated Harrison Smith, they've elevated Andrew Van Ginkel there in Minnesota. And by the way, guys, over the last 2 seasons under Flores in Minnesota, that Vikings defense is number 1 in the league in EPA per play over those 2 seasons. So, you know, in my opinion, there's not a better defensive system out there. It sounds like Daronte Jones is a big part of the success that they're having there in Minnesota. And, you know, even though I would still really like Raheem Morris, I think Daronte Jones is maybe my number 1 guy that the Commanders have interviewed to this point and that they've shown interest in, that I would love to be the next defensive coordinator of this football team. And if you bring him in, man, you got the bright young offensive-minded offensive coordinator David Blau, the guy that you didn't let leave the building, and then you got Daronte Jones, who's on the up and up of one of the most revolutionary defenses in the entire National Football League. So I think Daronte would be an excellent hire. Now shifting focus here a little bit to Anthony Lynn, who is the current running backs coach here in Washington, and he is a finalist to be the next head coach of the Cleveland Browns. And if he gets hired, that's great news for the Commanders, because they get not one but 2 third-round picks in the next 2 upcoming NFL drafts. Not this year's, but in 2027 and 2028, they would get third-round comp picks if Anthony Lynn gets the Cleveland head coaching job. Now, I still think it's probably unlikely he gets the gig. I think that they're more likely to go in the direction of a Nate Scheelhaase, who I think they're trying to hire today. I think they're meeting with him in LA. And the fact that they're flying out there shows that they've got some interest in him. So I think Scheelhaase will probably be the one that gets the job in Cleveland. But yeah, I think that that's going to be something that's very, very interesting. And, if Anthony Lynn does get the job, that'd be great for the Commanders. But at this point, I just think it's pretty unlikely. And I think he'll be back next year. Now, before we get into some jersey and uniform updates here, let's have a word from our sponsor at Prize Picks. The big game in Santa Clara is almost here, guys. We now know it will be the New England Patriots versus the Seattle Seahawks in this year's big game in the NFL. And there's no better way to cash in during America's biggest sporting event than with Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. And since the big game is right around the corner, this also means it's your last chance to get into the football action before next year. So close the season out right with Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly after you play your first $5. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Now, there is some rumblings going around. There's been some rumblings going around from NFL uniform, quote-unquote, reporter Zach Cohen on X, and he's been saying stuff like the Commanders are going to be getting new alternate uniforms this year. There's been some speculation about bringing back the Spear helmets in the dark maroon alternate uniforms. We talked about that on the channel last week. But that now there's rumblings that the Commanders could just be changing their entire uniform set heading into 2026. And we did a poll on this on the channel. It seems like a lot of you guys would be very open, if not you would openly support the Commanders changing up their look heading into future seasons. And a lot of now something that's definitely generating a lot of buzz is that if you go on Fanatics, if you go on anywhere that they sell Commanders jerseys, there's a huge sale going on when it comes to the regular burgundy home jerseys for the Commanders and the regular white away jerseys. Now, and also the black alternate jerseys. All of them have big sale prices on them. Websites are trying to get rid of them, okay? And, that usually happens when a team is about to unveil new uniforms for the upcoming season. Now, usually we don't, get official word on new uniforms for, at least a couple of months at this point. Usually they wait until like the dog days of the off season that generate some buzz, during a pretty cold time in the news cycle in the National Football League. But this is something that I think is actually realistic. And, what's interesting about the sales going on with the Commanders jerseys right now, guys, is that the only jersey that does not have a sale on it right now is the Super Bowl era alternates. And, I think that might indicate that we may be getting, new uniforms that more closely resemble the uniforms of the past in the Redskins era here in Washington. And I think that a lot of fans would support that. I mean, people absolutely loved the Super Bowl era alternates last year. I thought they looked awesome. And I think that it was their best look last year by far. And they did it, on 3 separate occasions. I thought they looked great in all 3 instances, obviously. And, if you get the burgundy version of that for the home games, then you get the white ones for the away. I think that would be just an awesome combination. You already have the helmets, so you can just transition those alternate helmets to be your full-time helmets. Obviously, you already have the white jerseys accompanied there. So you just have to make pretty much the burgundy version of that, and then you have your new jerseys, standard home and standard away heading into the 2026 season. And then in terms of your alternate helmet and jersey, that's when you can introduce the spear, and that's what I would prefer, is that you have the Super Bowl era, regular homes and regular aways. You go with that look. I think it's a really good look, and then you go with the spear and bring back that spear alternate helmet, to not only give not support, but admiration to the past, but also to Native American culture. I think that's something that this team has gotten away from in its branding. I think they could bring back. Like, I'm not saying bring back the old name, but I do think that there is a way to celebrate Native American culture here with this football team that I think is savory, and that everyone can accept and really feel good about. And I think that that's a really cool way to do it, because that is known as one of like the all-time great alternate looks in NFL history. And just imagine Jaden Daniels and the rest of this crew wearing those alternate uniforms, man, with the spear on the helmet. I think it'd be such a cool look again, especially if you put a modern spin on it. And I would just absolutely love to see that, a little bit of a blast from the past. You have the new branding and all that different stuff. You're not going all the way back, but I think that paying service to the history of this football team that does have a very rich history, and then also paying your respects to Native American culture and celebrating that, I think is something that this team should really embrace, and I think it'd be a good idea for this football team moving forward if they do so. So I would really like the Super Bowl era jerseys to be the full-time uniforms, both standard home, standard away, and then if you just bring back the spear logo alternate, it's like you don't even need another alternate as far as I'm concerned, man. Like, maybe you think about an all-white alternate. That'd be really cool with a white helmet, because you are allowed 2 alternate helmets now. That'd be really, really cool if they wanted to introduce that as well. But I think that the fans are pretty clear on this. They want kind of an older school type of standard uniform, and I think they really like the Super Bowl era uniforms from last year. So I think with the fan reaction to those, I think that gives this team the green light to say, okay, those are going to be our full-time unis, and then we can really get creative with our alternate looks moving forward. So that's where I'm at with that whole situation, guys, and that's going to be it for today's coverage of the Washington Commanders here by Chat Sports. I'm going to have more content for you guys coming up later in the week. I think tomorrow we're going to be putting out a video on Mel Kiper Jr.'s updated Commanders round 1 draft target. So if you're interested in that, make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Till next time, hail to the Commanders.